Let's talk about a huge challenge. How in the world do you build a government for one of the largest, most incredibly diverse populations on the entire planet? Well, the answer lies in a really powerful idea called federalism.
I mean, seriously, just try to wrap your head around that for a second. Over a billion people. And get this, the last census recorded more than 1,300 distinct mother tongues. It's a mind-boggling puzzle of diversity. So how on earth do you make that work?
So here's our game plan. We're going to break it all down. First, we'll nail down what federalism even is. Then, we'll check out the too many ways that countries form these federations. After that, we'll dive right into India's specific rulebook, see how it all plays out in the real world, and finally, we'll look at how power gets pushed all the way down to the local level.
All right, let's jump right in. We're starting with the absolute heart of the matter, the basic rules for how different levels of government can share power without stepping on each other's toes.
So, at its core, federalism is basically a power-sharing deal. Instead of having just one single government calling all the shots, you formally divide authority between a national, central government and smaller regional governments, like states or provinces. And this is where you see a really big difference between systems. In what's called a unitary system, like Sri Lanka's, the national government basically holds all the cards. It can give power to local units, or it can take it away. But in a federal system, which is what Belgium moved towards, both the central and the state governments have their own powers, and those powers are guaranteed by the Constitution. They're independent, and one isn't just a puppet of the other.
So, what are the key ingredients for a system to be truly federal? Well, first, you've got to have at least two levels or tiers of government. Each one has its own clear area of responsibility, its jurisdiction. And here's the crucial part. Those powers are locked in by a constitution, so they can't just be changed overnight. To handle any fights, the courts step in as a neutral umpire. And to make sure everyone can actually do their job, each level has its own way of getting money. Now, what's super interesting is that not all federations are built the same way. There are actually two completely different paths that countries have taken to create a federal union. The first way is called coming together. This is when a bunch of independent states decide, hey, let's team up. They pool their power to create a bigger, stronger country, mostly for security. Think of the USA or Australia. In that kind of setup, the states usually keep a lot of power. The second way is holding together. This is when a really big, diverse country decides to divide its own power to manage all its different regions better. India is a perfect example of this, and here the central government usually ends up being a bit more powerful. Okay, so how does India fit into this picture? Let's zoom in and look at the actual constitutional blueprint that holds this massive country together.
And here's a really cool little fact. The Indian Constitution never, not once, uses the word federation. Instead, it calls India a union of states. But don't let that fool you. If you look under the hood at how it's actually built, it follows every single one of those core federal principles we just talked about.
And this is how they split up the work. The Constitution lays out three clear lists. The Union list is for stuff that affects the whole country, like defense and currency. Only the central government handles that. The State list is for local things, like police and agriculture, which is the state's business. And then there's the Concurrent list, with things like education and marriage, where both can make laws. But if their laws ever clash, the central government's law wins out. Having it on paper is one thing, but how does it actually play out in the real world? Let's take a look at how this idea of federalism has really been put to the test in India over the years. This sounds kind of backwards, right? After independence, one of the very first big tests for India's democracy was this huge demand to redraw the state boundaries. The big question was, would carving up the map actually tear the country apart? So a lot of leaders at the time were terrified it would be a disaster. But get this, the exact opposite happened. Creating new states based on common languages, making sure people who spoke the same language lived in the same state, didn't divide the country. It actually made it more united. And, as a bonus, it made day-to-day administration way easier. The second big test was language. You see, there's no single language that a majority of Indians speak as their mother tongue. Hindi is the biggest, but it's only about 44%. So trying to force one language on everyone was just never going to work. Instead, the Constitution took a different path. It protected this diversity by officially recognizing 22 scheduled languages. This simple act helped avoid the kind of terrible conflicts we've seen in other countries. And that brings us to a really big turning point, right around 1990.
Before then, it was common for one political party to be in power at both the central level and in most of the states. And honestly, that sometimes weakened the whole idea of federalism. But after 1990, things changed. Powerful regional parties started popping up, and that kicked off an era of coalition governments at the center. This new reality forced everyone to adopt a new culture of power sharing and to respect the independence of state governments. It was a game changer. All right, let's drill down to the final layer and see how this all comes together, bringing government right down to the villages and towns. This right here is where federalism gets personal. The whole idea is captured in one word: decentralization. It's the process of taking some of that power away from the big national and state governments and handing it over to a brand new third level, local government. And the logic is simple. Local people know local problems best, so they should have a say in solving them.
So back in 1992, a huge constitutional amendment made this third tier official. India now has a three-level system of government. You've got the union government at the top, the state governments in the middle, and now at the grassroots level, you have local bodies. In the countryside, they're called panchayats, and in the cities, they're called municipalities.
And the sheer scale of this is, well, it's just mind-boggling. Today, there are about 3.6 million elected representatives serving in these local governments all across India. That single number is bigger than the entire population of many countries. It is, without a doubt, the largest experiment in democracy happening anywhere in the world.
And this 1992 amendment wasn't just for show. It gave these local governments some real teeth. It made regular elections a constitutional requirement. It set up independent state election commissions to run them. It reserved seats for people from marginalized communities. And maybe the most groundbreaking change of all, it required that at least 1/3 of all positions be reserved for women, which has completely transformed their participation in public life.
And that really gets to the heart of it. In the end, the reason India's federal system works isn't just because of some rules written in a book. It's because of the spirit of democracy itself, this shared idea that you have to respect diversity, and more than anything, have a genuine desire to live together as one nation. But, and this is the big but, this brings us to the final critical question. We have this incredible structure in place for local self-government. The framework is there, but the journey is not over. Why is it that so many of these local governments, even with constitutional power, still struggle to get the money and the authority they need from their state governments? It seems that last crucial step, true decentralization, is still very much a work in progress.